There are truths so uncomfortable that most people would rather never hear them. But I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to show you the hidden side of power, the one that hides behind every kind smile and every innocent gesture. What you're about to hear is not theory, it's the secret map of how the most influential minds on earth control, persuade, and shape human behavior. I'm Melkor Huaman, and for years I've studied the anatomy of manipulation, the invisible structure that moves your choices when you think you're choosing freely. On this channel, Invisible Power, we don't create victims, we create strategists. Because the knowledge I'm about to share with you isn't meant to enslave, it's meant to free you from the silent control others use against you. I remember when I first started observing the small gestures. A subtle shift in the eyes, a prolonged pause, a word repeated with surgical precision. Those signals revealed to me that the world doesn't run on justice or truth. It runs on influence. Robert B. Cialdini called them the weapons of persuasion. Edward Bernays turned them into propaganda. Niccolo Machiavelli dressed them as strategy, and Sun Tzu transformed them into the art of war. They all understood the same law. Whoever masters the mind masters reality. You need to understand something from the start. Toxic people don't appear in your life by accident. They choose you because they can smell your energy, your empathy, your emotional openings. They're experts at reading emotion before you even feel it. And once they do, they begin to weave their web. Paul Ekman studied the micro expressions that expose them, but most people never learn to recognize those signs. Robert D. Hare defined the psychopath as a social predator, someone who smiles while sharpening the knife of manipulation. Sometimes you don't need open enemies. All it takes is a partner who makes you doubt yourself, a boss who subtly blames you for his mistakes, or a friend who offers advice disguised as concern. That's dark psychology in its purest form, emotional control dressed as affection. And the reason it works is simple. The human mind craves approval, and those who understand that instinct can use it as a leash. When I realized this, something inside me shifted forever. I could no longer look at the world with the same eyes. I began analyzing conversations, news, gestures in silence. I noticed patterns, repetitions, formulas. I saw how political speeches used Bernays' principles, how salespeople applied Cialdini's 6 laws, how charismatic leaders triggered the reciprocity bias and social proof. Nothing was coincidence. Everything was psychological design. Dale Carnegie taught that to win friends, you must make others feel important. But what no one tells you is that this principle, when pushed too far, becomes a tool of control. Whoever masters empathy can master desire. Whoever commands silence can command guilt. And whoever understands the fragility of the ego can shape wills. Aldous Huxley warned us in Brave New World, the control of the 21st century would not come through force, but through seduction. We wouldn't need chains if our minds learned to love their own prison. Today, you see it everywhere, on social media, in relationships, in corporations. Everything is designed to keep you compliant, productive, and distracted. Modern manipulation doesn't shout, it whispers. That's why this knowledge isn't mere curiosity. It's mental survival. If you don't learn to identify manipulators, you'll become fuel for their power. And I'm not just talking about classic narcissists or psychopaths. I'm talking about anyone who understands how to operate another person's emotions for personal gain. Philip Zimbardo proved in his Stanford experiment that power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. When someone gains control, their true nature emerges. And in that moment, you must decide whether you'll be the observer or the player. Because in the human mind, there are only 2 positions, the influencer and the influenced. Every time you tell yourself, I could never do that, someone else is writing the script of your life. And the price of not mastering your own psychology is to live under someone else's. That's why this video is not a warning. It's an invitation. You're about to learn 5 dark psychology tricks used by the sharpest minds to guide behavior, spark attraction, and gain advantage without being noticed. But before you do, you need to understand the ground you're standing on. Kevin Dutton once said that functional psychopaths thrive because they possess one quality most people fear: emotional coldness. And if you can develop a controlled version of that coldness, you won't become cruel. You'll become free. Calmness is the armor of the wise. Emotion is the weapon of the manipulator. I've worked with executives, leaders, and broken people who were emotionally destroyed by relationships where psychological power was invisible until it was too late. They all had one thing in common. They never believed they could be manipulated. But the most confident mind is always the most vulnerable. Stephen Hassan calls them invisible chains of influence. The ones that make you obey without being ordered, love without being loved, apologize without having done wrong. Once you learn to see those chains, you can never unsee them. In the next sections, I'll show you how to identify those chains, how to break them, and, if you choose, how to use them ethically. But first, understand this. There's no power greater than self-mastery. Real dark psychology isn't about manipulating others. It's about preventing others from manipulating you. This is the first step. If you've made it here, it means you're already crossing the threshold between the naive and the aware. And once you cross completely, the world will never deceive you in the same way again. When you begin to observe human behavior through the lens of dark psychology, you realize something disturbing. People rarely act out of logic. They act out of hidden emotional patterns. Every smile hides a strategy. Every compliment carries intent. And every silence speaks a language of power. The toxic mind operates with precision. It studies you, not to understand you, but to decode your triggers. Manipulators don't guess. They calculate. They mirror your tone, mimic your gestures, and reflect your beliefs until you trust them. That's the first psychological trap, the illusion of similarity. When someone seems to think exactly like you, your defenses collapse. You assume empathy, but what you're really seeing is camouflage. Robert Greene called it strategic empathy, the art of appearing to care just enough to disarm. It's how charm becomes control. And once you let them in, they start rewriting your perception of reality. The great manipulator doesn't need to shout. They only need to plant doubt in your mind and let it grow silently. Niccolo Machiavelli once wrote that people must either be caressed or destroyed. The toxic personality combines both. They seduce first, destroy later. They give you comfort, then withdraw it, creating an addiction that isn't to them, but to the emotional relief they provide. This is what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. The same mechanism that keeps gamblers glued to machines and lovers tied to chaos. A manipulator never shows their full hand. They reveal just enough of their darkness to make you curious, not scared. They know that mystery breeds attraction and that fear mixed with admiration creates dependency. That's the essence of psychological control, to make you crave the very hand that holds your leash. The second trick they use is isolation, not always physical but emotional. They cut you off from the people who could expose their game. They do it subtly, criticizing your friends, sowing doubt about your family, making you feel misunderstood by everyone except them. Slowly, your world shrinks until their voice becomes the only one that matters. Philip Zimbardo described this as cognitive constriction, the narrowing of perception until the victim can no longer imagine freedom. The toxic manipulator doesn't imprison your body, they colonize your thoughts. But here's the paradox. They can only control what you refuse to face. Every insecurity you hide becomes a doorway. Every need for validation, every fear of rejection, every unhealed wound becomes a password they can use. That's why the true battle of dark psychology isn't external, it's internal. To defend yourself, you must first see your mind as a map of vulnerabilities. Ask yourself, what do I crave that others can exploit? Approval, belonging, love. The moment you identify that need, you begin to disarm manipulation, because no one can control a person who no longer fears being alone. Robert B. Cialdini explained that influence thrives on 6 principles: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. Toxic people weaponize all 6. They'll give you small favors to make you feel indebted. They'll make you commit verbally to small things, so you'll comply with bigger ones. They'll make you believe everyone else agrees, even if no one does. They'll fake authority, charm, and urgency to trigger your obedience. Every time you buy something you don't need, chase someone who disrespects you, or stay silent when you should speak, one of those 6 triggers is in play. Influence is everywhere, and it's not always evil, but when used by those without empathy, it becomes a psychological weapon. Edward Bernays used these same mechanisms to engineer consent on a massive scale. He didn't sell products, he sold ideas disguised as desires. That's what manipulation truly is, the transformation of your needs into someone else's profit. You think you're choosing freely, but your choices are pre-written scripts. And here comes the most dangerous illusion: believing you're too intelligent to be manipulated. Intelligence doesn't protect you from manipulation. Self-awareness does. Even the greatest minds fall when their emotions are played correctly. Daniel Kahneman called it the thinking fast trap, the tendency to trust intuition over analysis when emotion is high. Manipulators exploit that. They don't need to be smarter than you, they just need you emotional enough to stop thinking. The third trick is gaslighting, the systematic distortion of your perception until you doubt your own memory. It starts with small contradictions. You're too sensitive. That never happened. You're imagining things. Over time, your mind bends under the pressure of doubt, and reality becomes negotiable. Gaslighting is the perfect weapon because it doesn't destroy facts. It destroys your trust in yourself. Once you start apologizing for being right, you're already theirs. And yet, there's a way to reverse it. Psychologists like Stephen Hassan suggest anchoring your sense of reality through documentation, writing down events, keeping evidence, building an external memory that can't be altered. Every written truth weakens the manipulator's spell. Truth, when recorded, becomes armor. Another tool of dark psychology is mirroring through emotional contagion. You've seen it in crowds, protests, even relationships. One person's emotion infects the group like fire. Kevin Dutton's research on psychopathy shows that high-functioning manipulators master emotional mimicry. They can radiate calm when chaos serves them, or panic when panic gives them power. They are emotional architects. But there's a defense: neutrality. When you remain emotionally still, manipulators lose their grip. The game depends on reaction. Without your emotional feedback, their tactics crumble. The absence of response is the loudest message you can send. And that brings us to the fourth trick, the mirror collapse. Manipulators depend on your reflection to exist. When you stop feeding them attention, validation, or outrage, they vanish like smoke. Silence becomes your shield. I've seen this happen in relationships, boardrooms, and friendships. Once you learn to observe without reacting, their entire strategy collapses. You stop being the prey and become the mirror in which they see their own emptiness. There's also a final layer: control through kindness. Toxic people know that the most effective chains are made of empathy. They'll apologize just enough to reset your hope. They'll play the victim, not to seek forgiveness, but to trigger your guilt. Once they do, you'll lower your guard again, and the cycle restarts. That's why self-awareness must evolve into self-command. Emotional intelligence isn't just understanding feelings, it's governing them. As Paul Ekman taught, mastery of micro-expressions begins with mastering your own. When you can read yourself clearly, no one can rewrite your emotions. So before we move on to the 5 dark psychology tricks, remember this: darkness isn't defeated by light, it's defeated by understanding. Awareness is not resistance, it's transformation. The toxic mind manipulates through chaos. The awakened mind creates order through clarity. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You become the observer, not the target. In the next section, I'll show you how to take this awareness and turn it into a set of practical habits, mental routines that allow you to use dark psychology ethically, to protect your energy, to strengthen your influence, and to rebuild your inner sovereignty. Because power without control is destruction, but power with awareness is liberation. Now that you understand how manipulation operates, it's time to step beyond awareness and into mastery. Knowledge without application is useless. It's just theory floating in your mind. The true power of dark psychology begins when you learn to apply its principles consciously, ethically, and strategically. The first thing I want you to realize is this: using dark psychology doesn't make you dark, it makes you aware. The difference lies in intention. The toxic use it to dominate. The wise use it to defend, influence, and guide, because persuasion, when rooted in truth, is not manipulation, it's leadership. Let's begin with emotional detachment. Every manipulator feeds on your reactivity. When you learn to pause before responding, you steal their oxygen. Your silence confuses them, your calmness disarms them. This isn't weakness, it's controlled strength. As Sun Tzu wrote, supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Practice this in your daily interactions. When someone tries to provoke you, don't react immediately. Observe the emotion rising within you, name it silently, and let it pass. You'll feel the instant pull of control leaving your body. You're no longer a puppet. You're the puppeteer of your own mind. The second habit is controlled empathy. Empathy is a double-edged sword. It connects you to others, but it also exposes your emotions to those who can use them. Controlled empathy means understanding without absorbing. Listen deeply, but never lose your center. Feel, but do not fuse. Every morning, I train my emotional radar. I ask myself, whose feelings am I carrying right now? Are they mine, or have they been planted? This small question can save you from 1,000 manipulations. Because once you learn to separate your emotions from others, you regain your energy. The third habit is cognitive reframing. When a manipulator tries to guilt trip you, reframe the narrative in your mind. Instead of thinking, I disappointed them, tell yourself, they're trying to control me through guilt. You instantly switch from victim to observer. You stop playing their game and start writing your own rules. I often tell my students this. Your perception is your shield. Reality is not what happens to you. It's how you interpret what happens to you. The toxic can only wound you if you accept their story as truth. Now let's talk about the power of strategic silence. It's one of the most underestimated weapons in psychology. Toxic people expect chaos, emotion, and reaction. When you give them nothing, they start to collapse. Silence forces them to face themselves. It's like a mirror that reflects their emptiness. But silence doesn't mean passivity. It means selective engagement. You choose when to speak, when to walk away, and when to let the storm exhaust itself. You no longer fight for control, you become control. And this leads to the fourth habit, framing your environment. You must understand that energy follows attention. If your surroundings drain you, they control you. Start organizing your space, your digital life, and your relationships with precision. Each detail is psychological architecture. Even small acts, cleaning your desk, muting notifications, cutting off one toxic contact, rebuild your sovereignty piece by piece. When you design your environment intentionally, you stop being reactive and start being directive. Remember, manipulators thrive in chaos. Clarity is your revenge. The fifth habit is deliberate influence. This is where dark psychology becomes ethical power. You've probably heard of Robert Cialdini's principle of reciprocity, give first, then receive. But when you combine it with authenticity, it becomes unstoppable. You're no longer manipulating, you're aligning. You lead through resonance, not deceit. For example, if you want to inspire trust, don't demand it, embody it. If you want respect, project certainty without arrogance. Human behavior follows energy. People mirror what they sense. Influence is not about what you say, it's about what you radiate. And if you want to go even deeper, practice what I call the invisible push. It's when you plant an idea in someone's mind and let them believe it was theirs. You do this by asking guiding questions instead of giving orders. For instance, instead of saying, you should do this, you ask, what would happen if you tried this approach? Their brain feels ownership over the thought, and resistance disappears. That's ethical persuasion, guiding without forcing, leading without controlling. Right now, if you've been absorbing this message, I want you to take a moment and breathe. You've already entered a different mental frequency, one where awareness becomes strategy. And if this knowledge is resonating with you, I invite you to stay close. Subscribe to this channel, Invisible Power, because what comes next will refine your perception forever. I'm not here to teach tricks. I'm here to teach power, real power, the kind that makes you unshakable. Now let's move into another practical domain, self-conditioning. Every morning, before the world influences you, you must influence yourself. Create a ritual that programs your mind for dominance and calm. I use what I call the 3 anchors: posture, breath, and focus. First anchor, posture. Stand or sit straight as if invisible strings are lifting your spine. This tells your nervous system that you're in control. Second anchor, breath, slow it down. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 6. This resets your internal rhythm, reducing cortisol and increasing mental clarity. Third anchor, focus. Before touching your phone, visualize how you'll respond to manipulation today, not with anger but with awareness. Imagine yourself seeing through lies, staying calm under pressure, and walking away from chaos with a half smile. This is how warriors of the mind train, not through aggression but through inner discipline. Psychology is like martial arts. You don't train to hurt people, you train so no one can hurt you. The same applies here. When you master dark psychology ethically, you don't become a manipulator, you become immune. You turn every attack into information, every insult into data, every conflict into practice. Another routine I teach is the detachment drill. Every night, mentally replay your day and identify every moment someone tried to influence your mood. Did they succeed? If yes, ask yourself how they did it. Then visualize yourself responding differently. This simple 5-minute practice rewires your subconscious for resilience. Soon, you'll notice something extraordinary. The same people who once controlled your emotions will begin to lose their grip. They'll sense that you no longer feed them energy and they'll pull away. Don't chase them. Let them go. Nature removes what no longer resonates with your vibration. Finally, remember this. Self-control is contagious. When others sense your calm authority, they either rise to your level or remove themselves. You don't need to prove power. You radiate it. In the end, dark psychology isn't about darkness at all. It's about clarity. When you understand manipulation, you stop fearing it. When you stop fearing it, you start mastering it. And when you master it, you become something rare in this world, a person who cannot be owned. In the next section, I'll take you into the final stage, where understanding turns into transformation. We'll close this journey with reflection, with challenge, and with truth, because power without reflection is chaos, and awareness without courage means nothing. When you reach this point, something changes inside you. You no longer look at people the same way. You begin to see behind the smiles, behind the compliments, behind every subtle shift in tone. You start to perceive intent, and once you do, the world will never look innocent again. But awareness is both a blessing and a burden, because once you see the strings, you can no longer dance blindly. You must choose who you'll become, the manipulator, the victim, or the conscious strategist, the one who understands the game but refuses to play it cruelly. For years, I thought power meant control over others. I was wrong. True power begins when you stop needing to control anyone, because you finally control yourself. The greatest victory is not dominance, it's discipline. The ability to feel every emotion and still act from clarity, not impulse. When I teach dark psychology, people often ask me, "Isn't this dangerous?" And I always answer the same way. Only if you lack purpose. Knowledge doesn't corrupt, it reveals. The same fire that burns a city can forge steel. It depends on who's holding the torch. Think about your life right now. How many times have you silenced your intuition because someone convinced you to doubt it? How many opportunities have you lost because fear whispered louder than courage? How many times did you say yes when everything inside you screamed no? This is your wake-up call. The chains you feel are not made of iron, they're made of perception. And perception can be rewritten. You can choose right now to stop being the target of emotional warfare and become its interpreter. If you want to master your psychology, start by mastering your attention. Attention is currency. Every manipulator is trying to spend it for you. Take it back. Guard it like your most sacred resource. When you give someone your focus, you give them access to your energy, and when you waste it on chaos, you starve your own potential. Look around. Distraction is the modern form of slavery. They don't need to chain you, they just need to keep you entertained. Edward Bernays knew this a century ago, and today his techniques run in algorithms. You scroll, they feed, you react, they win. You stop thinking, they own you. So how do you fight back? By becoming conscious, by observing every emotional hook that tries to pull you in, by asking, who benefits if I feel this? Because awareness breaks every spell. The world is full of people pretending to be strong, when in truth, they're just loud. Real strength doesn't shout, it radiates. You can feel it in someone's presence, in the calmness of their voice, in their eyes that don't flinch under pressure. That's the kind of power I want you to build. Silent, centered, unshakable. It's not about intimidating others, it's about never being intimidated again. From this moment forward, you have two choices. You can go back to sleep, scroll, react, repeat, or you can start living with intent. You can walk into every room with awareness so sharp that nothing escapes your perception. You can listen beyond words, see beyond gestures, and think beyond emotion. That's what it means to master dark psychology, to see the invisible and remain untouchable. Robert Greene once said, "Power is a game of perception, and perception is built on awareness. When you control what you perceive, no one can rewrite your story. But remember, power without morality destroys. That's why I want you to promise yourself something, that you will use this knowledge not to deceive but to defend, not to manipulate but to understand, because the moment you use darkness consciously, it becomes light." Let me ask you something. Who are you when no one is watching? Are you the person shaped by others' expectations, or are you the architect of your own mind? The greatest manipulation you will ever face is the one you inflict upon yourself, the stories you tell to justify fear, comfort, or submission. If you can conquer that internal manipulator, no external one will ever touch you again. Now, before this video ends, I want to challenge you. Not with words, but with silence. Close your eyes for a few seconds after I finish speaking. Ask yourself, what part of me still allows others to control my peace? Don't run from the answer. Face it. Because on the other side of that realization lies freedom. And when you open your eyes, remember this: awareness cannot be undone. Once you see the truth, you carry it forever. You'll notice the tactics, the patterns, the invisible pushes, and every time you do, you'll grow stronger. I'm Melkor Huaman, and this is Invisible Power, the place where knowledge becomes armor and the mind becomes a weapon of peace. If you're ready to keep evolving, stay here, because the next lesson will go even deeper into the psychology of control, attraction, and persuasion, and how to wield it without losing your soul. Now tell me, after everything you've just learned, who's really in control, them or you?